I debated on making this video for a long time because it's generally uncool to talk about mental health, but I think we're seeing a change lately. I think more people are starting to open up about it and talk about mental health. And with my experience over the past 6 months, I knew that I wanted to share my journey so that hopefully it can help people going through the same thing. So let's back up, and I want to talk about my experience with health anxiety. So my journey with health anxiety started when I was a teenager. It really all started when I saw my dad have a cardiac arrest at the gym. One day we were working out together, and all of a sudden I just see him collapse right in front of me. He had no pulse. Thankfully, there were some nurses in the gym, and they came over. They started performing CPR. One of the gym employees called 911. I went and got the defibrillator. And actually, thanks to that defibrillator, it was able to kind of shock him back to life. And that mixed with the CPR worked. And he was stable before the paramedics even arrived. And he's still with us to this day, which is incredible. I'm so thankful that my dad made it through that experience. But it was really traumatic for me, seeing somebody who I love so much just all of a sudden, bam, drop on the floor like that, no pulse. It really makes you think like something like that could happen to anyone. So, I think I started to fixate on it and think, well, what if that happened to me? I'm his son, there could be genetics. What if one day I just fall over like that and that's it? So I just started letting that ruminate. And meanwhile, during that same time, I discovered that I actually did have a heart condition called SVT. And I made a video on my channel years ago when I had a procedure that actually resolved that. But at the time when I was working through that, learning that I had SVT, I was having these incidents of really rapid heartbeats. And I know with anxiety, your heart will race, but this was actually a medical reason for my heart racing. My personal record is 258 beats per minute, and that was confirmed on a professional heart monitor. So that's next level from when you're anxious and your heart's just beating really fast. So, I had SVT, I'd get these episodes, I never knew when they would come on, they were random, I never knew how long they would occur. So all of that was really difficult, and it led to a lot of anxiety and ruminating, which eventually led to my first panic attack. If you've never had a panic attack before, there's no easy way to describe it because it's one of those things that you never fully get it until it happens. But with a panic attack, it can look like a number of things for different people. For me, my heart starts racing, my hands and my feet get really sweaty. I typically will get short of breath. I feel lightheaded. I feel dizzy. I feel like I'm going to pass out. And it's not a pleasant experience. Sometimes I get chest pain. Back then, particularly, I used to get chest pain with panic attacks. And so it's something that the first time it happens, you may end up calling an ambulance or you may end up going to the emergency room because you have no idea what's going on. You think, am I having a heart attack? Am I having some kind of medical emergency? It's terrifying. So, I started having these panic attacks. I started having generalized anxiety, and I fell into this anxiety loop of just feeling awful, always feeling dizzy, feeling lightheaded, having headaches, just worrying all the time, having all these what if thoughts. It was a really difficult time in my life. And eventually through regular counseling and learning about some supplements, I was able to work through that. But it took a while, and everything really was great for probably the past 5 or 6 years, probably even longer. I mean, really, once I got past the SVT and I worked through some things in counseling, things were great. Until about 6 months ago. So for the first time in my adult life, my health anxiety returned. It all started when I got this weird sickness in November of last year. I had this infection and it was causing some weird symptoms. I had a fever at one point just from the infection, and I just felt really off. I had to take a round of antibiotics. After that, I just felt lightheaded. I felt dizzy. I just didn't feel like myself. And that was always a trigger back in the day for me, is whenever I felt off and I couldn't figure out why, I would start to get really anxious. So after getting sick in November and after taking the antibiotics and just feeling constantly off, I started to spiral. I started to worry more and more. What's wrong with me? Why do I feel dizzy? It was getting to a point where I was so fixated on it that when I would stand up and walk, I felt like the whole room was just moving around me and like I was just gonna fall over at any time. And after this, I got a really bad case of the stomach flu over December during Christmas. I remember one day after I was fighting the stomach flu for a couple of days, I just couldn't hold food down. I couldn't hold liquids down. And it got to a point that I just felt so bad, I went to the ER to get checked out. I was so worried, so afraid that like if I can't hold liquids down, I'm dehydrated. I was feeling lightheaded, rapid heart rate, dizzy, just a lot of the same feelings that have been connected throughout this entire experience. And I think a lot of that was definitely an anxiety attack or, generalized anxiety throughout that experience. Some of it I'm sure was actual dehydration, and I had the stomach flu, so there was a lot going on, but I went to the ER and they basically said, yep, you got a bad case of the stomach flu, go home and rest. They definitely said you do have anxiety for sure, because like every time they would come into the room, they had mentioned that my heart rate would increase just from them being in the room. That was eye-opening. That's when I started to realize, okay, I've been to the ER, they ran all these tests, nothing was majorly wrong, they didn't find anything catastrophic, they just said you have a bad case of the stomach flu, go home and rest, and it's gonna get better. So at the end of December, after having the stomach flu, I was terrified to even get out of my chair. I was so worried that walking across the room, I was gonna get dizzy, I was gonna pass out, I was gonna just keel over. And it sounds dramatic, but I legitimately felt so awful, even after getting better from the stomach flu. This is just day-to-day life, feeling so terrible. And, throughout the process, I kept just thinking, I need to calm down. I would try to do deep breathing. I would take the lavender essential oil. I would seek reassurance from friends that I was fine, but none of it was really helping. I just kept feeling panicked. So what did I do? Well, I remembered back to when I was a teenager and I went through severe anxiety. I remember back then, I told myself there were 3 things that you needed to have in check in order to get past anxiety. You needed to have your mental health in check, you needed to have your physical health in check, and you needed to have your spiritual health in check. So I got to work in each of these 3 areas, analyzing what I would need to do to get them in check. And I started with mental health because I think that's the obvious starting point when you're dealing with panic attacks and anxiety. So I started Googling tips about anxiety, and I remember I came across this Reddit post where someone recommended a book called The DARE Response to Anxiety. They also mentioned that they had a free app, so I thought I would start with the app because I'm allergic to reading books. So I downloaded the DARE app and I started listening to one of the guided audio tracks that you can listen to when you're having a panic attack. And I remember my mind was blown by what the narrator was saying, because I expected this guided meditation would be something to just calm you down, take deep breaths, relax your muscles, everything's gonna be fine. But instead, in this guided audio track, the narrator was telling me to ask for more. Like, you think your heart rate is fast now? You think you feel like you're gonna pass out now? Ask for it to get worse. And I'm like, what? Like, you mean to tell me instead of trying to calm down, the thing to do is to ask it to get worse? So I was so intrigued, I decided to buy the DARE audiobook. I noticed it actually had really positive reviews on Amazon, which is rare for a self-help book. I listened to the thing basically 24/7 until I finished the book. As soon as I got to the meat of the book, my brain just exploded. The DARE response is basically that you need to surrender to the fight of anxiety. See, with anxiety, we tend to be doers. It stems because we don't like a situation and we want to do something to fix it. I don't like the way I'm feeling. Because I feel lightheaded, because I feel dizzy, because my heart rate is going fast, I need to do something in order to fix that. I need to do deep breathing. I need to smell my lavender oil. I need to escape this crowd and I need to go be by myself so that I can calm down. And if I do the right things, then I can change the way I'm feeling. But the DARE response treats that as fighting anxiety. And when you're fighting anxiety, you're not going to win. It just gets worse. See, here's the thing. The feeling of anxiety, the rapid heart rate, the butterflies in your stomach, that's actually just adrenaline. Adrenaline itself is not fear. You know, we have adrenaline in exciting situations sometimes. If you like roller coasters and you ride them, you know, you get the butterflies in your stomach, your heart is beating fast as you're getting to the top of the hill before you go down the hill. But chances are you're excited. I know some people don't like roller coasters. I get that. I know that this analogy is not going to hit with everyone. But for those of us who do like roller coasters, you feel nervous, you feel tense, maybe you even feel a little lightheaded, but you're excited. Because adrenaline is not anxiety, our perception of adrenaline can create fear. I think my camera's overheating. I guess I'm gonna have to go back inside. The physical sensations that we feel when we're anxious, the rapid heart rate, the sweating, feeling lightheaded, feeling dizzy, we're actually feeling adrenaline. And our body gives us adrenaline when our fight or flight system activates. Adrenaline is actually a wonderful thing. It's meant to perk us up when there's actual, real physical danger to attend to. So imagine a bear is charging you. That's an emergency. That is a dangerous situation. If a bear is charging you, you need to get out. You need to run away. You need to do what you need to do to get to safety and protect yourself. And your body will give you a jolt of adrenaline in that situation. And the funny thing is, when there's actual danger, you don't even really feel the adrenaline or think about it because you're busy attending to the danger. You're using the energy that adrenaline gives you to escape the scenario, to get to safety. And that's why we see like mothers who have lifted cars off of their children or something like that, because they get the boost of adrenaline and their body gives them extra energy to handle a dangerous scenario. So when we're anxious and we're stressed and we're constantly worried about something, eventually our fight or flight system is going to think, okay, this is danger, because it keeps coming up in the brain and the alarm system gets triggered and gives us adrenaline. Now, what happens is for us with health anxiety, we're scared of the feeling of adrenaline and we treat it as more danger because we think the feeling of adrenaline means something is wrong. We must have some kind of disease. We must have a heart problem. We must be about to pass out or something like that. So you can see where this is going. It's called the fear of fear loop. When you're anxious all the time, your body is eventually going to respond by perceiving it as danger and giving you adrenaline. It thinks, oh, we're in a dangerous scenario. Clearly this is a problem. I'm going to give you adrenaline to deal with it. When we get adrenaline, but we don't have danger to attend to, we focus on the adrenaline. We go, oh my goodness, why is my heart beating so fast? Why am I sweaty? Why do I feel lightheaded? Am I about to pass out? And we perceive the adrenaline as danger, so our fight or flight system goes, oh, we're in danger. This feeling is danger. So what do? I do the only thing I know how to do, which is give more adrenaline to treat the danger. It's this vicious cycle where the more you're worried about your anxious feelings and sensations, the more you're going to have them because your body's just going to keep giving you adrenaline, which is the very thing that causes those sensations. So the nervous system is all confused, and a panic attack is just a massive shot of adrenaline. And that's what the DARE response is trying to get people to see, is that you're not going to win by trying to calm down when you're anxious. You already have the adrenaline in your system, so the best thing you can do is ask for more, because then your brain is going to see, oh, you know what? Actually, this is not a dangerous situation because the brain is asking for more. In other words, if your heart is beating really fast and you feel like you're going to pass out, you can say, hey, anxiety, make my heart beat faster, make me pass out now. Like, come on, really, is this the worst you got? Can't you make me more uncomfortable? And the reality is anxiety can't make you more uncomfortable because you can't just give yourself adrenaline on command. So when your brain starts to see, oh, wait a minute, they're not concerned about the sensation anymore, it's not danger, the nervous system is going to slowly back off until you're not having constant panic attacks and not having those general feelings of anxiety and those symptoms every day. The nervous system is going to start to ramp down, and when it gets out of that overly sensitized state, you start feeling like yourself again. But this concept is easier said than done because it genuinely requires you to accept and allow your symptoms fully. And it's very easy to white knuckle in that scenario of, okay, I'm gonna tolerate the symptoms until they're over, and then once they're over, they're not gonna come back, right? No, I mean, you have to basically accept that you could have these symptoms for the rest of your life, and you're not going to, but you have to genuinely get to a state where you don't care about the sensations and you're willing to just let them be there. And once you do that and your brain can learn that these symptoms are not dangerous, well, that's when they eventually fade into the background. So I started seeing this on the mental side. I started doing exposure therapy and pushing myself outside of my comfort zone little by little. Maybe it's going to the grocery store if you're scared to leave your house, or maybe if you're further along, it's traveling and getting on a plane if you haven't really left your hometown. Doing little experiences that make you uncomfortable, they scare you, but the more you do these experiences, the more you're not scared by them anymore, the more your nervous system starts to back off and you get your life back. So once I learned some tips for the mental side of anxiety, I then turned to the physical side. And though it may seem counterintuitive, one of the best things that you can do when you have anxiety is exercise. I know it may seem weird. It's like, I'm worried about my heart, or, I feel off. I don't want to go for a walk. I don't want to go to the gym. But moderate exercise is actually highly beneficial to mental health. Even when you're having those physical sensations. In fact, if you have a lot of adrenaline in your system, going for a run can actually be one of the quickest ways to get it out of your system, because you're giving your body a way to use all that excess energy. The other thing you can do is look into certain supplements that can really help with anxiety. Magnesium has got to be the #1 most important supplement that you can take if you struggle with anxiety. It's a great electrolyte. It's actually also good for your heart. So if you have heart palpitations, sometimes that is a symptom of anxiety. Magnesium is going to help you with that. It helps regulate the nervous system. I would highly recommend that everybody consider taking magnesium. I would also consider taking vitamin D as well as certain B vitamins, but make sure you talk to your doctor and get your vitamin levels tested before you start any new supplements. Now, the other consideration with the physical side of anxiety is actually diet. You may not realize it, but there's some foods that can be extremely inflammatory to your gut, and your gut health is actually heavily linked to your mental health. So definitely I would look into taking a probiotic, but also there's certain foods like gluten and dairy that can be especially inflammatory for different people. So I would recommend getting a food sensitivity test if possible. I know for me that I don't do well with gluten. I've actually noticed a pattern in my life over many years that when I eat a lot of gluten, like if I eat pizza or I eat a lot of carbs, I tend to be cranky and moody for a while after I eat it. So I've actually been doing the low carb diet. I find that's helpful for me, but that's not going to be a fit for everyone. Some people do better with gluten. Some people do better with dairy than other people. So again, consider a food sensitivity test. Maybe talk to your doctor about that. But finding the right diet and the right things to eat is going to go a long way for your mental health. Also, make sure you get sunlight exposure. Go for a 10-minute walk in the morning and a 10-minute walk in the evening outside. Just get outside. I know, again, it seems scary. It seems like the wrong thing to do when you just don't feel like yourself. You feel horribly off. But going outside and getting some sunlight is going to help a lot with your mood. And the third thing I worked on with my anxiety treatment was the spiritual side. And there comes a point with anxiety recovery for some people that you start to ask why. When you're going through this constant suffering and everyone's telling you the way out is to basically accept the suffering, you start to ask why. Why do I even want to live anymore? And sometimes I would start to go down that path of thinking that. But I realize this section is going to look different for everyone depending on your beliefs. I'm a Christian, so my worldview comes from a Christian perspective, but it's going to look a little bit different for everyone based on what your spiritual beliefs are. But for me, I started thinking, okay, the Bible tells us to be anxious for nothing. And if you're a Christian, you probably agree that this is one of the most annoying Bible verses when you're dealing with anxiety, because fellow Christians will just hit you with it all the time. Well, the Bible says be anxious for nothing, so what are you worried about? Just don't be anxious. And I would always tell people it's so much more complicated than that. I can't just say, all right, I'm going to think about something else and not be anxious. And when you get later on in your recovery, you are able to do that. But when you're earlier on and you're having the physical symptoms and the physical response, you cannot just say, oh, I'm just not going to be anxious. Like, you feel the sensations. You can't just flip a switch and turn off the feeling of the sensations. So that Bible verse would always frustrate me, and that's something that I wrestled with. But one day I got a really impactful message from a friend who's a fellow Christian, and they shared with me the 5 essential truths to live by according to author Richard Rohr. And they are as follows. Number 1, life is hard. Number 2, you are not that important. Number 3, your life is not about you. Number 4, you are not in control. And number 5, you are going to die. And this all sounds so harsh, but it's not when you have the peace that God is in control. I know where I'm going after I die. I know I'm going to heaven, and a lot of health anxiety stems from a fear of dying. When you boil it down to its core, it's I don't like the physical sensations because I'm afraid I'm going to pass out or X, Y, or Z, and I'm afraid I'm going to pass out because if I pass out, I may die. It's a fear of death. But we were never promised a comfortable life on earth. As a Christian, I know that my purpose on earth is to evangelize. It's to make disciples. And I can do that even when I'm anxious and not feeling well. My friend reminded me that God gives us everything that we need, not necessarily everything we want. Everything else is just a bonus. At the end of the day, I have a roof over my head, I have food, I have water, and I have the knowledge to evangelize. And that's something that I can do even in the middle of a panic attack. This was powerful for me because even as I'm filming this video and even now in my life, I can still have a sour attitude about when am I going to feel 100%? When is this going to be over? When are things going to be back to the way they used to be? Because still, I'm not 100% through this, and anxiety, I believe, is something that you have for life. I don't think it needs to cripple you for life. I think you can fully manage it and live with it, but I think it's something that you have for life. And sometimes when I get that sour attitude, why me? Why do I feel this way? Why do I have to deal with this? But whenever I get this way, I just have to remember life is not about me. I'm not in control, and I'm still able to evangelize and carry out my mission here on earth. So in this conversation with my friend, the topic of Philippians 4:6-7 came up. Well, if the Bible tells us to be anxious for nothing and that we're not given a spirit of fear, then why am I anxious? The Bible is true, so the scripture is true, but it is also true that I'm anxious. So what exactly do I do with this information? My friend pointed out that that's where the but comes in. The Bible tells me not to be anxious, but I'm anxious. Both things are undeniably true. But the Bible has ultimate authority and I'm not supposed to be anxious. So if I am anxious, what do I need to do in order to resolve that? And realize when I say, what do I need to do? I'm not talking about the doing of sniffing your lavender or taking deep breaths or trying to calm down, because we don't want to be doers as anxious people. But what there is to do when you're anxious is to just accept it, to let go, to know that you are not in control, and to know that your body is going to take care of you. You don't need to try and control your heart rate. You don't need to try and control your breathing. Your body has been taking care of you all this time. So why now are you trying to decide what your heart rate should be? One of the facilitators of the DARE community, she always says, what are you going to do if you're wearing your Apple Watch and you see that your heart rate is too high? Like, what are you going to do? Stop and crack open your chest and perform open heart surgery on yourself? There's nothing you can do. It's your body's job to regulate your heart rate and your breathing and how you feel and your blood pressure. And there's nothing that you are going to do that's going to change that. So just let your body do what it needs to do and it will all work itself out. I would highly recommend reading the DARE book, which I'll have linked below. And if you struggle with health anxiety or any type of anxiety or panic attacks, I just want you to know there is hope. And I mean that very genuinely. I have been in such a dark place over the past 6 months, and things are looking up. And if I can get through it, you can get through it. My DMs are always open if you need someone to talk to. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a medical professional. So obviously I can only do so much to give advice. But if you need someone who's been through it and know what it's like to talk to, I'm always here. I'll leave you with this. Ultimately, you have to get to the place where you're more scared of missing out on life experiences than you are of the feelings of anxiety. Life is short. None of us are guaranteed another second on this earth. So why do you want to waste it in your house, being anxious, too scared to go outside? And I know how that sounds to someone who is currently stuck in the anxiety loop. And it's okay if right now you're in a place where you're more scared of anxiety than you are of living life. But you have to work on reversing that, and you have to get to a place where you're more scared of missing out on life than you are of your anxious feelings. You're not going to get any younger. Now is the time to travel the world, do things that you've always wanted to do. Do it now before you get any older, because it's not going to get easier. And that's been a big motivator for me is I don't want to waste my 20s just sitting around, not traveling, not doing things I want to do because I'm anxious. I want to do it while I'm anxious, learn how to manage my anxiety, and have all of these amazing lifelong memories that I'm making at the same time. Because ultimately, none of us know how long we're going to live. So go out there and make the most of it.